Although Zen is a word of only 3 letters, 3 volumes would not explain it, nor even 3 libraries of volumes. If one were to compile books on the subject to end of time, they would not explain it. For all that could be written would only be ideas about Zen, not Zen itself. Indeed, whoever imagines he has explained Zen has in fact only explained it away. It can no more be bound by a definition than the wind can be shut in a box without ceasing to be wind. Thus, any attempt to write on Zen may seem an absurdity from the beginning, but that is only so if either reader or writer imagines that Zen can be contained in a set of ideas. A book about London is in no sense London itself, and no sane person would dream of thinking that it is. Yet, apparently, intelligent people often make the equally ridiculous mistake of identifying a philosophical system, a dogma, a creed, with ultimate truth. Imagine that they have found that truth embraced in a set of propositions which appeals to their reason. There are thousands of men and women searching through volume after volume, visiting religious societies and attending the lectures of famous teachers in the vain hope that they will one day come upon some explanation of the mysteries of life. Some saying some idea which will contain a solution to the infinite riddle. Some continue to search till they die. Others imagine that in various ideologies they have found what they desire, and a few penetrate beyond ideas about truth to truth itself. There are some religions and philosophies which lend themselves more easily than others to the error of mistaking the idea for the reality. Religions in which the creed and the symbol are emphasized at the expense of the spiritual experience which they are intended to embody. This, however, is less a reflection on those religions than on the ignorance of those devotees. But there is at least one cult in which the error is almost impossible, precisely because it has no creed, no philosophical system, no canon of scriptures, no intellectuality, comprehensible doctrine. So far as it can be called a definitive cult at all, it consists of devices for freeing the soul from the fetters, devices which are picturesquely described as fingers pointing at the moon. And he is a fool who mistakes the finger for the moon. This cult is Zen. That's an excerpt from the essay on Zen. Of more we will continue to cover, but it's from the book Become What You Are by Alan Watts, and this is his essay on Zen. It's a book which is a compilation of essays of various different topics of which he has explored throughout his lifetime. And I think many of which of these essays were written throughout his lifetime too, and just compiled into this Become What You Are book. Excellent book. Some of the essays get a little bit much, so be forewarned. But most of them are very eloquently put and a lot less, what would you say, academically inclined, I suppose. So if you're not interested in academics and that type of academic think, there are essays within this that do contain that, and then there are majority that don't. But welcome back to the podcast. My name is Zach Hampson. You're watching the Zach Hampson podcast. I want to thank you for taking your time here, for watching this here. Today we're going to go through this wonderful essay written by Alan Watts. I think it's fantastic. The reason why I think it's fantastic is because I like Zen. I've come to find that I really like the thoughts and the way that people that I wouldn't say understand Zen, but I guess have come to find Zen, sort of look at everything else in life. And for a long time, I think that I innately had that within me, and I just didn't know what that meant or could explain it. Not that you can explain it, but I didn't have words to put against it. And it's like he's saying, most things in life, most people are looking for, they're searching for these things, they're reaching out for the different doctrines and philosophical extracts and looking for that one line or that quote or that teaching that's going to just make it all click for them. And too often than not is that the religious idea or the symbol gets put as paramount in front of you actually finding any truth. It becomes a medicine to you. And the goal of medicine is not that you stay on medicine, it's to make you healthy. And more often than not, most things become the medicine and they become the addiction. The goal of medicine, the goal of a doctor, rather than, say, a religious figure, and now this could be many different religions, I'm not talking any particular, East or West, I'm saying, typically becomes this figure that wants to keep you sick and keep feeding you things and never want you to be healthy. The religious or the teachings become the medicine that you're forever on, instead of the idea of being, you're now healthy, move on with your life. As if you ever really could move on with your life, right? But that's what I find so interesting about this, what would you say, philosophy? Does a bit of a disservice for it. But let's continue to read. Back to the book. Zen, a form of Buddhism that developed in China and now flourishes principally in Japan. Zen itself is a Japanese word derived from the Chinese cha'an, or cha'an-na, a form of the Sanskrit dhyana, which is usually rendered in English as meditation or contemplation. This, however, is a misleading translation, for although in the terminology of yoga, dhyana signifies a certain state of contemplation, a state that we should somewhat inaccurately call trance, Zen is a far more inclusive term, which come nearer to its meaning if we remember that the word dhyana is actually related to gnana, a Greek gnosis, or knowledge in the very highest sense of that word, which is to say supreme spiritual enlightenment. Gnana, another form of which is sometimes spelled Daiseian, is very close to Zen. The more so when we remember that Zen is said to have come into the world at the moment when the Gatman and the Buddha found enlightenment, while sitting one night under the famous Bodhi tree at Bodh Gaya in northern India. There, according to the famous There, according to the teachers of Zen, he found something which cannot be expressed in any form of words, an experience which every man must undergo for himself, which can no more be passed on from one man to another than you can eat another person's food for him. Zen, however, as specific cult, is mainly a product of Chinese mind. Buddhism developed. It is mainly a product of Chinese mind. Buddhism developed in India is a highly subtle and abstract system of philosophy, a cult of sublime otherworldliness perfectly suited to the inhabitants of the hot climate where life is able to flourish with little labor. The Chinese and the Japanese, on the other hand, have a climate nearer to our own and have the same practical bent as the peoples of Northern Europe. Perhaps the greatest triumph of Buddhism is that it was able to adapt itself to a mentality so far removed from the Indian. Thus, Zen has been described as a Chinese revolt against Buddhism. It would be nearer to the truth to call it a Chinese interpretation of Buddhism, although the term revolt certainly conveys the fierce, almost iconoclastic character of Zen, a cult which has no patience for any practice or formula which is not immediate relationship with the one thing of importance, enlightenment. To understand this revolt, or interpretation, or better, a revolutionary interpretation, some of the fundamental principles of Buddhism must be borne to mind. The Buddha, who lived some 600 years BCE, taught that life as we live it is necessarily unharmonious because of the selfish, possessive attitude we adopt towards it. In Sanskrit, this attitude is called Trishna, often mistranslated desire. And though there are no one word for it in English, it may be understood as the craving to resist change, to save our own skins at all costs, to possess those whom we love. In fact, to hold on to a life like grim death. And that particular phrase has its moral. If anything that lives and moves is held, it dies, just like a plucked flower. Egotism is a fierce holding on to oneself. It's building oneself up in a haughty stronghold, refusing to join in the play of life, refusing to accept the eternal laws of change, of movement, of which all are subject. But that refusal can only be an illusion. Whether we like it or not, change comes, and the greater the resistance, the greater the pain. Buddhism perceives the beauty of change, for life is like music in this. If any note or phrase is held for longer than its appointed time, the melody is lost. Thus, Buddhism may be summed up in two phrases: let go and walk on. Drop the craving for self, for permanence, for particular circumstances, and go straight ahead with the movement of life. The misunderstanding, the state of mind thereby attained is called nirvana. But this is teaching easy to misunderstand, for it is so easy to represent the doctrine of letting go as an utter denial of life and the world, and nirvana as a state of infinitely removed from all earthly concerns. Zen, however, corrected this error in the most surprising and unique manner. Pause there for a sec. It's interesting. I know quite a few people that follow the teachings of Buddhism and would perhaps call themselves Buddhist. I have a apologies. I have a heavily Christian background and brought up many years very deep in it, very theologically versed in it. And what's so funny is that I recently attended a function which was held by a couple that were Buddhist and had these typical Buddhist lifestyles and things like that, and they had friends over that shared similar belief systems. And what was so funny to watch was that I couldn't help but see such stark similarities between how they were practicing and how Christians practice. It was almost one for one. And now a lot of people are going to be very angry at me for saying this, but it seems as though, and I don't know what it's like in the East, of course, not having been there or seen the practices, but at least in the West, people that seem to practice Buddhism practice it with a sort of Christian-like guise over the top of it, as if they have the fundamentals and the understandings of Buddhism, and perhaps they might have learned quite a lot, that may have even visited where Buddhism is practiced as the main religion, and they might have even studied it very thoroughly. But for whatever reason, it seems to be interpreted and born into the West as this sort of weird Christian-esque, like, played out in real life actions. What I mean by that is that before they were eating, they would pray over the food. I'm like, oh, okay, that's, okay, that's very Christian-like. And then before they were talking, they would talk about meditation and reflecting on things and reflecting on the beauty of the world. I'm like, wow, okay, that's very Christian-like, doing the meditation and separating and looking, we go to God and we reflect on the word and things like that. And then they would talk about the otherness and this tree and how it's separate from themselves and how all these things are outside of themselves and, being thankful to that. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's very Christian too. We always talk about, reflecting on the beauties and creation of God and all these sorts of things that are around that. And again and again and again, I can't remember all the scenarios, but there was a significant chunk where I would walk away from that night and I just thought, wow, for such people that seem to be so adamantly against typical religion, or seem to at least describe themselves as above it in various circumstances, you seem to hold such vast similarities between the two. Now, although, they may or not believe in a one what is it? One form of a god, or what is it? Monotheistic and things like that. But their practice and the practicalities that they employ seem to imply a stark similarity of this doing, of this otherness, of these actions that need to be taken in order to represent the beliefs into the world, manifest. And it's interesting to see that played out, because what Zen teaches, well, if it teaches anything, and the more you learn about Zen, the less you know about it, and the less you know about it, the more you realize that there's nothing to learn. And the more that you realize that there's nothing to learn, you realize that there's nothing to do. And that's what's fantastic about the teachings of Zen. And it's something that I've always embodied within myself. I've never felt an inclination of any practical tasks of which I needed to undertake in order to obtain various states of being. I believe that simply just wanting to be in that state and being in that state are two separate things. Interesting thoughts. Look, let's go back to the book, see what Alan Watts has to say. So much so that the great part of Zen teachings may appear at first to be mere buffoonery or nonsense. A disciple came to Zen master Chocho and asked, "I have just come to this monastery. Would you mind giving me some instruction, please?" The master replied, "Have you eaten your breakfast yet, or not?" "Yes, I have, sir." "Then wash your dishes." It is said that as a result of this remark, the disciple was suddenly enlightened to the whole meaning of Zen. On another occasion, a master was about to address an assembly of students when a bird began to sing in a nearby tree. The master remained silent until the bird had finished, and then announced that his address had been given and went away. Another master set a pitcher before two of his disciples. "Do not call it a pitcher," he said, "but tell me what it is." One replied, "It cannot be called a piece of wood." The master, however, was not satisfied with this answer, and he turned to the other disciple, who simply knocked the pitcher over and walked away. This action had the master full of approval. It will be asked whether these antics have the least connection with religion, even with ordinary sanity. They are regarded by the exponents of Zen as full of the deepest significance. And when we remember that Zen has been beyond question one of the most powerful influences in shaping the art and culture of the Far East, such behavior is entitled to respect. Has it some symbolic meaning? What is it about? The answer is that it has no symbolic meaning, and that it is about nothing. But it is something, and that something is the very obvious but much ignored thing: life. The Zen master is in fact demonstrating life is in its actuality. Without words or ideas, he is teaching the disciples to know life directly. Sometimes in answer to religious questions, he will give a smack in the face, returning a reality for an abstraction. If he gave a reasoned answer, the disciple would be able to analyze it, to subject it to intellectual discussion, and to imagine a mere lifeless formula as living truth. But with a smack, a bird, a pitcher, a heap of dishes, there can be no mistake. A smack is here one moment and gone the next. There is nothing you can catch hold of, nothing other than the most lively fact, as much as alive as the passing moment, which can never be made to stay. And the bird is a bird. You hear its song, but you cannot seize the notes to make them continue. It is and is gone. And you feel the beauty of its song precisely because the notes do not wait for you to analyze them. Therefore, the Zen Masters is not trying to give you ideas about life. He's trying to give you life itself, to make you realize that life in and around you, to make you live it, instead of being a mere specter or a mere pendant absorbed in the dry bones of something which the life has long deserted. A symphony is not explained by mathematical analysis of its notes. The mystery of a woman's beauty is not revealed by a post-mortem dissection. And no one ever understood the wonder of a bird on the wing by stuffing it and putting it on a glass case. To understand these things, you must live and move with them as they are alive. The same is true of the universe. No amount of intellectual analysis will explain it, for philosophy and science can only reveal its mechanisms, never its meaning, or, as the Chinese say, its Tao. What is the Tao? The Zen master answers. Usual life is the very Tao. How does one, being oneself, into accord with it? If you try to accord with it, you will get away from it. For to imagine that there is a you separate from life which somehow has to accord with life is to fall straight into the trap. If you try to find out, you are at once presupposing a difference between yourself and the Tao. Therefore, the Zen masters say nothing about the means of becoming enlightened. For understanding the Tao, they simply concentrate on Tao itself. When you are reading a book, you defeat the purpose altogether. If you think about yourself trying to concentrate on it, instead of thinking about what is written, your attention is absorbed in your efforts to concentrate. The secret is to think of the book and forget yourself. But that's not all. The book is of little use to you if you go on to the other extreme and simply let it run away from you, or let it run away with you. On the contrary, you must bring your own understanding and intelligence to it. And then, through the union of your own thoughts and the thoughts in the book, something new is born. The union is an important task. You must just do it, not waste energy thinking about doing it. Same is true in Zen. It does not ask that we should so submit ourselves to life that the world altogether masters us and blots us out. There are some who never live, who are always having thoughts about life and feelings about life. Others are swept away on the tides and circumstances, so overwhelmed by events that they have nothing of their own. Buddhism, however, is the middle way. And this is not a compromise, but a union between the opposite to produce a higher third, just as a man and woman unite to produce a child. The same process is found almost in every religion, in some deeply hidden, in others plainly revealed. In Christianity, man must be born anew of water and the spirit, symbols of substance and energy, concentrate life and the mind of man. Thus, the prayer to Christ to be born in us is the hope for the same enlightenment that we find in Buddhism. The story of Christ's birth is its allegory. For the Holy Ghost is spirit, and Mary, from the Latin word mare, sea, water, is the world, called in Sanskrit Maya. And the mother of the Buddha was also called Maya, and he too was supposed to have been miraculously conceived. Thus, the realization of Christ within the Buddha, within the Tao, within or the Krishna within is in each instance the result of a process which Zen presents to us in this unique and almost startling manner. It is the understanding of the one which lies behind the many, the bringing together of opposites, of subject and object, the ego and the universe to create the Holy Child. And yet, we must beware of the definition of the convenient summary of religious endeavor. It so easily becomes a mere catchphrase, a truth so fastened in a nutshell that it ceases to be the least use. In its prison, it withers away and dies. Therefore, Zen comes at this stage with the most inconvenient question. When the many are reduced to the one, to what is the one to be reduced? When the many are reduced to the one, to what is the one to be reduced? Only he who knows what that is understands Zen. It would be futile to try and explain any further, for to do so would be to defeat the very purpose of Zen, which is to make everyone find out for himself. It is like a detective story, with the last chapter missing. It remains a mystery, a thing like a beam of light, which can be seen and used, but never caught, loved, but never possessed, and by that we may know that Zen is life. Apologies, got a blocked nose. Wow. Incredible. And it's that very reason and those very teachings in this that he summarizes in the last couple of verses there that I think, not that you can explain it, do explain my thoughts and my actions and my results of contemplation and feelings within myself about the very life and the nature of which my life has progressed and which my life has turned out to be. And the way that I choose to look at the world as well, I suppose, sums it all up very, very well. When the many are reduced to the one, what is the one reduced to? I love how he talks about these ideas and these things that, as if these are things to do and things to change, and the pitcher asking, explain this to me without telling me it's a pitcher of water. And this one student says, well, can I call it wood? He's just like, no. Next. And the next student just simply gets up, knocks it over, and walks away. And I love that, because that's how I've always lived my life. And whenever somebody would get hung up on something, have a deep hang up on whatever it is that they're going through in their life, you sort of realize, well, what are we doing? Is it real? I think sometimes we all need a smack in the face to realize what's real and what's not. And too often, as the Stoics say, you suffer more in imagination than you suffer in reality. Not to say that there's much correlation between Zen and Stoicism, of which there might be a very strong argument that there is none. But that's all you can do. Just laugh and enjoy. Thanks for listening.